Alright, starting another follow-up live stream from today's earlier video, which was showing the actual reball and reinstallation of this IC chip. And also, as a plus, I was able to get color correction going and even found that there's, I guess, two feeds of the video, and the one I was using previously was causing like some weird hue duplication of edges, and it was doing it all over, like the chips, the contact points, all of their edge lines would be duplicated and displayed about a couple of millimeters to a centimeter below where it actually existed on the screen. So basically just switched my video input and then did some color correction, and as you can see now, everything pops just a little bit better. You can even clearly read through the video that IC chip identifier. So this will make future videos so much better. You'll be able to see those details without just having to kind of go off of what I'm describing. And unfortunately, it took as long as it did to get, so the first few videos, those images might be a little hard to see the detail under the scope, but again, moving forward, it will no longer be a problem. So this IC was replaced, getting to the follow-up portion of the video. Tested this, didn't work. And as I said earlier, my assumption was that it wouldn't. I was simply taking the risk to see if a chip that couldn't be bought and purchased on the open market would have to be sourced. And I also believe these chips are different from what you're going to get inside of a standard Xbox controller. I believe that chip is specific to the Elite, but I can confirm that. Actually, they might be the same. They do have a different identifier, but I'm not sure if that is a relevant or more like a assembly date code. Popping it off and taking a look would determine, and I'm sitting here looking at one for a standard. It may be plausible that they could be swapped out without an issue, but I'll have to check that further, and I'll follow up on that one day. But as far as this goes, you can't buy this on the open market. This chip is made specifically for the Microsoft controllers and for the Xbox One. Whether or not it's interchangeable between a standard and an Elite is yet to be determined. But in an effort to try to establish whether or not a badly oxidized chip, and let me describe a little bit further what this means. When you open up the chip and these contact pads here look like these are fairly shiny looking, nice and bright, they're kind of vibrant. If it looks dull and gritty and then you remove that, let's just go ahead and show what I'm talking about here. You remove some of the solder, and underneath, even after you remove it, it doesn't have that nice shiny look to it. It looks kind of dull. None of these really have the exact shade that I'm talking about, and I can show with, I think, is it this one? Yeah. And the brightness maybe just turned up way too much to really make it visible on this because everything seems to pop. Yeah, I think the brightness is going to affect that, but let's pinch in here. Let's see if I've got another one that I can show it on. I don't think this one's going to do it either. none of these will really show it, but all of these have been cleaned up. And I was trying to see if I had anything else. Well, I'll demonstrate it one day in a future video. But basically, those pads look, imagine dirty drawers, a crusty butt stain, and that is what, not the best imagery to think of, but it kind of paints the picture. Nobody wants to see that. And nobody wants to see it on a board. So if these contact pads look crusty and just dry and brittle, and they're not shining up like they are here, and this is solder, so it doesn't quite, I'm trying to get zoomed in just right. There we go. And this is solder, so it's going to be a little shinier in appearance. But when you strip this off, that pad underneath should look about the same, unless you clean it up really good and you get it to where it's showing some of that gold, and so you've got a gold shimmer, but it should be nice and shiny. If you're seeing this kind of dull, almost like a brittle look to it, that is what we had going on under the chip. So in this area here, the pads underneath were fine. However, the pads on the bottom of the chip, when it was pulled off, you could instantly tell that, I think it was about 6 of those, were just really brown and dark looking, and even scratching after removing the pad with the soldering iron, taking the finest needlepoint tip that I have, which I think is this one, and just kind of scratching at it, it still was kind of dark and brittle looking. Like I said, looks like crusty old poop. If that's what your pad looks like on the chip underneath, then it's probably oxidized. Now sometimes you can clean those and you can get them to work. Or if it was a ground plane, it's probably not as big of an issue as long as multiples aren't that bad. But what that signals is that there was an overcurrent draw in that area, that those pads had built up resistance and they basically just kind of ran hot. And that caused that solder to get brittle and dry. And part of that resistance could have been maybe a poor manufacturing. You know, nothing's perfect. Again, not even the manufacturer gets these right every single time. So it could have been a manufacturing defect, but it's one of those that's considered not a defect because it probably worked for well past a year. If it does fail within the year, then that's where their warranty takes care of it. But let's say for whatever reason those pads were already oxidized and they started to get brittle on their own. As you're pumping current through it, that builds up the resistance, which then generates a little bit more heat, and in turn makes that pad oxidize even faster. So one problem feeds the next problem, and it stacks upon itself over and over and over again until it gets to the point of failure. And that's what we had happen with this one here. And it was an interesting issue because it actually got worse when we replaced the analog stick. We started to see more random behavior by replacing both of those, because basically the issue kind of snowballed where the sticks also had a problem because they were having to deal with that increased resistance of the chip, and from that putting new sticks on it that have, you know, fresh components. Basically it was allowing that chip to run at its max. So nothing else was kind of sharing the burden of underperforming. And it probably increased its resistance some more, making it run a little bit hotter again. And instead of seeing just a few of the random glitches, we started to see a wide spiral of issues where, like I said, the R3 button, when you pressed it, would cause different interactions on one click versus another. If you pressed up, it would run up for a little while and then it would stop and you'd hit up again, and then it was just this weird where it was almost like buttons were being pressed even when they weren't. And that, again, like I said, is an indicator that at least I've seen over time that this chip either needs to be reballed or replaced. And in this case, it needed to be replaced. So if you're seeing that issue, you may be able to solve it with putting new joysticks on. But more than likely, if it's widespread and it's really crazy, it's not just kind of like a simple drift issue, you're probably looking at replacing this. Again, that's the recap for the controller repair with the IC manual reball. If you're looking for that video, it was done earlier today. It should be the previous video in the stream. You can go through and see the manual placement of the balls, as well as the chip then being soldered to the board. This video was really just to, I guess, clarify and finalize that, as I suspected, this chip is blown, it's dead. It will never serve its purpose again. So my only options now are to either replace this chip or to replace the board. And in this case, I actually have one that I've already previously repaired, and this board is going to go into this controller, and that'll get the customer back up and running. And at some point in the future, I may fix this, or it may just end up being a parts board, because there are some other items on here that do go bad, but they don't go bad that much. So like I said, it'll probably be best for me to just throw this in the bin until one day I get in a controller that's just been beat to crap, but we know that that IC is still good, and swap it out, and then this will be a perfectly working Elite controller. Again, if you have any questions, leave them in the comment section. If you do have an issue like this and you found that you've replaced your analog sticks and you don't want to go any further than that, or if you're just comfortable having it done by a professional from start to finish, feel free to send it in to us. You can find our contact information on PlayStation Repair Augusta. For all console repairs, you will want to go to that site. You can also, again, ask those questions on the feed directly, but if you're trying to get a hold of us about a repair, best to use the website for the point of contact. But if you just want to ask a general question and follow-up of the video, then go ahead and comment below. And other than that, I will see you on the next video, or you'll see me.